nationalistic narcissism that compares the toxic family to the toxic consciousness of Western society. In the last video, I compared the golden child and the scapegoat to so-called white people and so-called black people, so we can understand how the consciousness family is pitted up against each other in order to maintain a system of haves and have-nots. This system of haves and have-nots is sold to the masses as if it's what they call freedom. And this freedom comes through what they call democracy. So a good example of this so-called freedom through so-called democracy that is sold to the toxic family members as if it's some kind of future version of our evolution is through like what's happening in Hong Kong right now. So Hong Kong was once a British colony given back to China with stipulations of a democratic political scene. That was a strategic move. That was a wartime tactic, knowing that the idea of democracy would grow into this festering cancer at a particular time. You have one mindset going against another in-house. So the same way a toxic narcissist would pin its family up against itself in order to maintain dominance and control, the narcissistic leaders of the so-called free world have done this with what they call socialism, democracy, capitalism, third world countries, first world countries, the savages, the primitive savage humans, and the evolved technology-based humans. What happens is that there's a fairy tale that's created with all of these theories and ideas, the same way that there's a fairy tale of origin of where we came from. They call the Big Bang, and all of the other theories that hold up the Big Bang that are pawned off by the Western idea of intellect through the education system, the university system. So like a dream, you're invited into a world, you're invited into an experience of consciousness for a certain amount of time. And as long as you play the game, as long as you play along with the characters, as long as you play along with the script that's within that storyline, that fairy tale, you'll remain an active player in that movie, or whatever you want to call it, as long as you maintain two specific things: direct engagement in the characters that the fairy tale characters perceive themselves to be, and direct engagement in the world that the fairy tale has created for you to live within. If you start thinking outside of the box of the world, you will start to make the dream unstable. If you start thinking outside of the box of the characters, then you will also start to make the dream unstable. If any one of these perspectives within that consciousness, within that dream, start to overtake, like if you start to think beyond the dream, if you start to think beyond the character, if you start to engage beyond the character, beyond the dream, this is where, similar to a dream itself, you will make the dream will break. As I've explained it before, the reasons why we hold on to dreams and when we go into dreams is because when you're in a dream, you're really going with the flow of your subconscious. So if you start to try to bring in your conscious perspectives into a subconscious reality, which has no, like trying to bring a linear interpretation into a non-linear reality, once you try to bring those two things into one focus, it's the focus that breaks the dream. The focus breaks the dream because the focus is you trying to figure out what you want to be a part of. Do you want to be a part of the subconscious dream that is an experience, or do you want to be a part of the linear interpretations of the subconscious dream that has more of an attachment to it, which is your attachment, your personal attachments? The thing with personal attachments or conscious attachments in a subconscious reality is that, just like the ego, if you are more of your ego than what the experience is challenging you to evolve with or as, then you'll be limited to your own thoughts and your own ideas of what it is you think should be. So the subconscious is not limited to your conscious reality. The possibilities in the subconscious interpretation of reality or breakdown or experience are well beyond an individual's conscious linear, like 1 + 1, 2 + 2 sort of thing. In what we call the real world, when you start to question the reality of the dream makers, the American dream makers, if you start to question the reality of the world itself and the people that are within that make up that world, you will start to break that dream. You will break that consciousness. You will break that reality. And what I'm saying is that in order for people to truly wake up, the American dream needs to be put to sleep. Right now, people are living in a space that is not conducive to their highest good because they have been convinced and conditioned through the fairy tale that their highest good is within the highest good of a toxic consciousness we call the American dream, Western civilization, so on and so forth. The toxic family environment of the nation is only accepted by the masses because we have been conditioned by the nation to accept the toxic in-house family environments. Until we break, see, this is the thing with the toxic in-house family environments will not be broken until the societal toxic environments are exposed for what they really are. Because right now, people in-house and people outside the house are still glorifying the society, this toxic consciousness, as if it is the evolutionary peak of our reality. This is what the television does in order to maintain the toxic consciousness overall, because the toxic environment is beneficial to the haves and have-nots program, being that as long as you have toxic people, that means you have people who are too consumed with the toxic reality to empower themselves, to evolve themselves, to gain a knowledge. Their time is consumed by survival, consumed by distraction, consumed by the fairy tales that have been created within this toxic mind control. So in order to put the American dream to sleep, the American dream that exists inside the people has to be seen for what it is first and foremost. So this is what's happening right now, where you have all this alternative news and all this information, alternative information that is challenging the mainstream information. The mainstream information is what maintains the toxic consciousness. Hong Kong right now is being overtaken by this idea of protest, and the idea is democracy versus old China. That's what's going on right now. The same way you have in the United States, the old racist identity in a fight with the new climate change, millennial, societally aware sort of individual. It's a show, it's a game show, it's a TV show that has nothing to do with the true evolution of the individual or the mass consciousness. Nothing. It's all a fairy tale. It's a distraction. The thing is that distraction is tied up with the American dream. So the old schools who are out there are still, the success of the American dream means the success of demographics of people. What kind of demographic of people would feel successful if the American dream succeeds? Of course, the people who came from that, who were cut from that cloth, who was cut from the cloth of the American dream. There's some people out there who are definitely cut from that cloth, and they can't let that go. It's their whole livelihood. It's their whole consciousness. So the success of the country, the success of democracy, the success of capitalism means the success of their own personal evolution. The success of their own personal evolution in this entire experience. So the new way to keep people from realizing this is to install this new age type of thinking that distracts the individual from these storylines and these worlds existing while keeping people involved in the evolution of these fairy tales. So one example would be stuff like in the New Age community. Let's use an example like Ralph Smart, Infinite Waters, who in these toxic consciousness, New Age sort of realities, they say things like whatever you give your attention to creates your reality. Is this true? Yes, but in play school, in like a kindergarten form of reality, whatever you give your attention to creates your reality. The thing with that is that whatever you have been giving your attention to also creates your reality. And whatever you're giving your intention, whatever you're giving your attention to as projections of the future will also create your reality. So the New Age community, this is a good example of the New Age community only really giving you a piece of the story, because if they give you a piece of the story and you don't know the rest of the story, then because you don't know the rest of the story, they can make a profit off of selling you the ideas, the possibilities of the rest of the story, now that they've given you a piece of the story. So a piece of the story is whatever you pay your attention to right now creates your reality. The rest of the story, that's for the present. But what about does the past and the past and the future doesn't exist? And in the New Age community, it's not supposed to exist, because the past exposes too much of the limitations of the New Age present, and the future exposes too many of the limitations of people who glorify the present right now. People in the New Age community don't know how to deal with the future because they haven't even dealt with the past yet. So they're trying to create this identity of how to deal with the present. And as long as you have a few catchphrases that are, people are relatable, people can relate to these catchphrases because they're like feel-good catchphrases, but they're not meant to last. It's not wisdom, it's fortune cookie wisdom. It's wisdom that lasts for as long as you're going to eat that cookie. But this wisdom, there's wisdom, the true wisdom that exists outside of that consciousness can't be found in those limited programs. So since the New Age community is being used to sell this we're all one, everything is getting better consciousness, the same way global warming, climate change, and this whole thing has been sold to people as an idea, to something to fix. As long as you have something to fix, then you don't really have to pay attention to that which is broken. So because you're on the move, right? Everything is getting better. This is what democracy is. This is what the American dream is. It's this idea of constantly moving towards something better, the future. The worshiping and this technological future, this is part of that toxic environment that isn't really being addressed right now, because like I said before, many of the groups of people invested in that toxic consciousness see that reality, see technology, see the university system, see democracy, capitalism, and the Western world as an evolution of themselves. They see it as something beneficial to this reality, to this experience. So if something that you are proud of is like leaking toxic fluid into the ocean, you're making money off of that. Your family's making money off of that. Your future generations are going to make money off of that. Are you going to say anything? Some people will. Other people will not. This is why I'm saying the difference between this old identity or these this is part of the differences between people who can only sympathize and those who can empathize. Those who can empathize can understand where I'm coming from with that statement, because they can understand that nobody is free until everybody is free. In the identity that is going on today, there's this broken space of people being, some people can be free while other people are completely enslaved. So since the evolution of consciousness is tied up in the identity of capitalism, democracy, the Western world, nothing will really change until the people start to remove this parasite from within them. So once this parasite gets removed from the individual, then it will be more easily seen how it's existing in society. One could argue the opposite happening as well too, because this is what I'm sharing too, the parasite existing in society to help people see the parasite existing in themselves. To close this all out, this nationalistic narcissism goes down to, like I said in the previous video, the scapegoat can be seen as so-called black people and the golden child can be seen as so-called white people. To take it a step even further, the scapegoats can be seen as conspiracy theorists or people who just don't go with the status quo, people who are not vibing with the Christopher Columbus, American dream, manifest destiny, colonial Western interpretation of reality. The golden children are the people who glorify that, people who are all about technology, all about the university system, all about Western intellect, all about the space program, and all about climate change and this idea of evolving, so-called evolving the consciousness or the reality of people through technology and democracy and so on and so forth. This identity that war brings peace. This is all part of that golden child mentality. In the golden child mentality, that they do not question the toxic family belief systems, because for many different reasons, but in this case, because it's become the golden children of society have glorified, they have gold plated themselves into a narcissistic version of reality, into a narcissistic version of themselves. The pinnacle of a golden child is to evolve itself into a narcissistic network, a narcissistic grid where it's surrounded by other subordinates, other golden children, scapegoats, flying monkeys, so on and so forth. So this identity can be seen by going from working in a business somewhere to owning your own business and becoming your own manager or entrepreneur within the Western toxic consciousness. Within this toxic consciousness, there's gap fillers to fill all the empty space there, the synthetic love, the synthetic food, the synthetic thought processes. You have the new agers who fill the synthetic spiritual process. You have the vegan movements that fill in all of the why is there seedless stuff out there, why is all this destructive food out there. See, the vegan agendas, this is why you can see how the new age is a part of, or the vegan movements, and it's all one storyline. Movements like the vegan movement and so on, all the other ones that are in or around that, they're more consumed by what you eat and not necessarily concerned with how the program created a destructive, like a cancer causing industry. This is where the sympathizers get separated from the empathizers. See, the empathizers are going to also see, yes, a better diet is better for people, but the sympathizers will not see that there is also an intelligence out there that has created a self-destructive program and is literally poisoning us. The vegan movement is mostly about, and all these other shallow surface layer new age type movements, these movements are ego based because they are only concerned with a linear type of mentality. So in the vegan agenda, it's really only concerned with, yes, they talk about the animals, and yes, they talk about the health, but there's little to no information on the forced upon us toxic foods in consciousness. There's almost an avoidance of these conversations, because once you get into those conversations, you're starting to get into the nuts and bolts that remove yourself from the egotistical versions of reality, and you start to get into the collective perspectives of what's going on. People who are engaged or involved with their ego, with the ego breakdowns of societal problems, don't want to get into deeper conversations, because take it a step even further, like I said before, the success of certain groups means the success of certain people. That's a small scale example of how people are controlled. You can see this with the reparations talk, pinning people up against each other in order to maintain control, and then produce this future reality that is not only accepted by the masses, but is the masses will be salivating at the mouth for this. A good example of how this happens is the reparations talk that just went down with the LGBTQ community. This happened a few weeks ago, I think, where the government was trying to pass or is still trying to pass some kind of bill that will give the LGBTQ community reparations, yet they still haven't given the so-called black people reparations. The attention is where the power is. So the system has the power of attention with the mainstream media, Hollywood, politics, so on and so forth. The ability to get people riled up in their emotions is what passes legislature, what passes all this information that people supposedly want. And the system knows this. So emotions are what get things done in this toxic family. When the government puts out there this idea of, we're going to give gay people reparations, what do you think they did that for? Because they know how emotionally reactive so-called black people are going to get when they see that. They're going to dangle around, hey, look at this, reparations for gay people. We're going to give it to them. Hey, we're going to give it to the gay people. You're the gay reparations. Fuck black people. Why? Because once that story gets exposed and beat down and everybody starts crying about that, then people will start begging for their slave reparations. Before they didn't have the system does these things because there's not enough conversation. There's not enough energy involved in the conversation. So what happens is they have to build up emotional conversation. They have to build up some kind of drama in the storyline to get more people talking about it. How they do this is one way is like a child, like they would with children in a toxic family, pin people up against each other. This time it's the gays versus the black people. Oh yeah, we're gonna give reparations to the gay people and fuck you black people. Why? Oh, why? Oh, that's wrong. Oh, we didn't mean to do a wrong thing there by offering reparations to black people or to gay people instead of black people. We're so sorry. We're gonna give you guys the reparations you deserve. Now you have 10 million or however 100, 300 more million people talking about, what's right, what the government needs to do for its people. That's to glorify the system, to keep adding energy to the system and taking power away from the people itself. This is how the toxic consciousness of Western society plays people against themselves. They sell the fairy tale of democracy. They sell the fairy tale of capitalism. They sell the fairy tale of evolution through technology and going to Mars and the heliocentric universe. All this stuff that it glorifies in society is all toxic. It's all the disease. If you go against that disease, you'll be labeled as a scapegoat. If you go with that program, you'll be accepted as the golden child. If you're accepted as a golden child, then you can play the American Dream movie line into the sunset, and that'll be your earthbound experience. You'll get whatever they have allowed you to experience. Meanwhile, we lose a lot of our time. We lose the majority of our time, and in losing the majority of our time and our attention, we are losing the majority of our consciousness because we have invested, we've diverted that energy into a program that isn't for our benefit, that is only for our enslavement. Programs in society are designed to maintain this codependent, toxic consciousness. Stuff like we wouldn't imagine. Obviously, like the Starbucks, the coffee, it really does affect your vibration. Just imagine a motor, and your motor is running boom, 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 boom. Well, however the speed is, if it's a little slower, a little faster, you have your optimal movement. Coffee has its own blah, 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 blah. It has its own thing. So if you install that frequency into all the other frequencies, it will affect them in a non-beneficial manner. That non-beneficial manner is not beneficial for the individual, but is beneficial for the system. The system that needs you to be moving at that blah, 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 blah. It needs you to be stressed out. It needs you to be constantly edgy or whatever it does. Point is, the more you are outside of your frequency, the more easily it is to get you to accept other toxic frequencies.